Ahoy, adventurers! Your old buddy Hambone is back with another code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. This code is good from March 16th to April 11th, and it is called Spring Fun. That's SPRINGFUN Fun. Now, this code is good for 5% off your order, any order $25 or more, and that is good in store or online. So if you are lucky enough to be able to walk through those glorious doors of Noble Knight Games, you can get your discount using the code SPRINGFUN. Or if you're like me and you're ordering from a distance in the Garden State of New Jersey, SpringFun's the one you're going to want to put in at checkout. Get 5% off your orders of $25 or more, and it's a long code. So if you're hearing this episode later, don't you worry. This code is good from March 16th all the way to April the 11th. So use the code SPRINGFUN and have some fun playing games that you get from our friends over at Noble Knight.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He's the only kid I know that actually read the rules to HeroQuest, Stu Horvath.
I didn't say that I actually played by them, though.
Two completely different things. How's it going today, Stu?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. So, Stu, today we're going to talk about HeroQuest.
Yeah. So, HeroQuest is an interesting thing for me because I posted about it recently on the feed, and I had no idea that this was a board game that meant so much to so many people.
I knew so many kids who had HeroQuest growing up. Not a single one of us knew how to play the damn thing.
And I think that that is true of a lot of the people who were enthusiastic about it on the feed too, but it's still an entryway for so many people into the larger world of tabletop gaming. I was really taken aback by it. It was something like I posted the damn thing and it was like already at 500 something likes in like an hour. I was like, what's going on? I thought it was going to be a quiet week, you know?
Oh no, people love HeroQuest. I mean, I remember when I got it on Christmas Day and I opened, the box was heavy.
Oh yeah.
Because there was a glut of miniatures and like furniture and doors that you could build for your dungeon to put on top of the game board.
I'm a sucker for cool monsters, but surprisingly enough, it's the furniture that I think is what really makes HeroQuest special. So many people told me that they continue to use their HeroQuest bits, the furniture and the fireplace and all that stuff, as terrain in their D&D games to this very day. And I totally understand why.
Oh yeah, I actually can totally see why people get psyched on things like Dwarven Forge, miniatures, and terrains, because if you had HeroQuest growing up, that's how you built a dungeon.
Yeah.
In fact, I was kind of disappointed the first time I ever played Dungeons & Dragons, like for real, and there was none of that bullshit. I was kind of like, but
Theater
HeroQuest,
of the mind.
I know. And yes, I know that's the way I prefer to play it now, but man, I was like thinking, oh man, I'm going to go hang out with my buddies. They invited me to play some Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to drink some beers. We're going to eat some pizza.
We're going to play with some toys.
Yeah, we're going to play some toys. and then there were no toys.
Yeah.
I felt robbed.
Life is full of disappointment. It's good to get that out of the, tear that Band-Aid off real fast.
All right, Stu. Well, enough waxing nostalgic. Why don't you tell our listeners about HeroQuest?
So HeroQuest is interesting on a whole lot of levels. It came out in 1989, which is sort of the beginning of second edition D&D, and it's a collaboration between Milton Bradley, famed board game manufacturers, and Games Workshop, the creators of Warhammer. Now, I think that this is particularly interesting because at this moment in time, Games Workshop is sort of like the young and upcoming scrappy upstart. Like they're giving D&D a run for its money with the miniatures and its miniature board gaming, and they're building a fan base that is, well, we talked about this in this Zweihander thing. It's very, very loyal and very kind of cut off. It doesn't feel as connected to the overall tabletop community as other things.
It's a very isolated fan base.
Yeah, and it requires miniatures to play. Theoretically, you would like that, Hambone.
I would.
But you got to paint them.
I wouldn't. My hands shake. I would not be a good painter of miniatures.
There's really intense guidelines about how you can paint some stuff, which I think is super crazy. Sorry, Warhammer fans. Like, I'm getting off track, but I have to say this. They have the codexes for Warhammer 40K, the space one, and like I think that you could get points taken off if you paint your guys wrong.
Wow.
Like, because the regulation.
Part of me kind of likes that, though. Part of me is like, yeah, the very organized part of who I am is like, all right, I can get down with this.
And I really like the books where they lay out the painting guides for like how it's supposed to be done. I find that extremely satisfying, but like to actually sit down and do it, like I hate being told what to do, Hambone.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely hate it.
The other side of me that is full on chaos is like, that's going to be a no from me, dog.
Yeah, I like the fact that we were both like dueling impulses.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, right at this moment in time in 1989, Games Workshop is being friendly, which is not something that has continued. They've become one of the most litigious companies in the tabletop space, super protective of their IPs. They sued about the word Space Marine.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember who they sued. There's a lot of people they could have sued. It might have been in context of aliens. It might have been Starship Troopers. But like, it's bullshit because Robert Heinlein is the first person to do it, to use the Space Marine term. And like, he did it in like the 50s. Like, you can't copyright that.
Yeah.
Games Workshop.
Tell him, Stu.
No, I'm not, because so
we don't want to get dragged on the internet.
Sued. So, like, to give you an idea of why I think it's just super strange to hear of Games Workshop collaborating with anybody, is the story of Bolt Thrower. Bolt Thrower is a heavy metal band. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I'm not, but with a name like Bolt Thrower, I want to be.
Yeah, it's like deathy, thrashy kind of stuff. It's like heavy. It's like the perfect music for Warhammer. So much so that they collaborated with Games Workshop and have like a Warhammer-themed album that has Warhammer art on the cover. And it's legit Warhammer. There was like a whole tie-in campaign. And then a couple years back, Bolt Thrower was like, we want to reissue this record, but the license ran out. So can we renew the license for the art? And they're just like, how dare you steal our art? And Bolt Thrower's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, we had a partnership. We did a thing together. Like, whoa. They sent like cease and desists and threatened lawsuits, and Bolt Thrower wound up like commissioning a different piece of art that looks sort of Warhammery. It's just like, come on, guys.
Well, shame on Bolt Thrower for making a deal with the old guy who clearly painted his miniatures wrong and he's no longer invited to the party.
Obviously.
He's been shunned.
Yeah, so in light of that, which happened many years later, learning that this was a collaboration between Milton Bradley and Games Workshop was just sort of surprising, because I just automatically think that Games Workshop doesn't like to play with anybody.
Right.
But that said, like, this is sort of like the first real mass market penetration of the Warhammer style, the Games Workshop style. Like, those orcs that you have in the HeroQuest box, like, they have a very specific look. The Chaos Warriors, like, all that stuff is like all pulled right out of the Warhammer stuff. And like, it's that British thing with British fantasy art has like a different vibe than American D&D stuff.
Yeah.
And like, it's kind of cartoony, but it's also super violent. HeroQuest isn't visually violent, but there's still like an implicit violence in it.
Like, you know it's coming.
Like the ghouls and some of the orcs carrying meat cleavers, which I think is just so, but cool, but, you know?
Yeah. Like, even that Conan looking dude on the cover, you know he's killed people.
Yeah. Like, you know that, like, he lops heads off. Like,
yeah.
And there's all these little plastic skulls that you can put on your furniture. Like, that proves it.
So good.
I know.
So good.
But like a really strong contrast with what I think audiences were used to at 89. And the game was kind of a phenomenon. It's billed as its own system. It's not so much a board game as it is a HeroQuest battle system. And that comes with its pros and cons. It's a very light RPG kind of elements. Like, you bring your characters into the dungeons and you go back, you get your loot, you spend your money, you upgrade your stuff, you level. Everything is laid out in pre-arranged scenarios too. So like, I think the main box comes with 14 and you play through them and your guys progress. The monsters don't really progress though. And
yeah, that's a problem.
There's a couple mechanical problems. Basically, when you're playing, it's about getting to a door and making the monsters come through the door at you. Because almost none of the monsters have ranged attacks.
Oh.
But you do. So like, you can kind of like wear them down as they get to the door. And once they get to the door, all three of you wail on them and then they die. You know? So there's not a lot of strategy that the game master player can use. Like, you're looking to separate one of the heroes from the pack, gang up on them before anybody else can get there, and then maybe you'll get a kill.
So I've since learned the rules, and I read about that, the choke point thing.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, man, like, how many scenarios would we have gotten through out of the 14 before someone inevitably would have been like, wait a second, if we just hang out here by this door and we can just pick them off and then whatever comes through, you break the game is over.
Yeah.
Because as a person who's running the game, I'm like, well, I don't want to do this anymore.
I think it becomes pretty clear pretty rapidly. I think it would only be a scenario or two because it feels like that's the natural progression. There's rule hacks out there for modern players that have fixed this. You could use them and play the game, and it's a completely different experience, and that's awesome.
Right, but at the time, there was no internet.
No.
It's just, this is the rules, this is what it is, you're done.
Yeah, and it's basically just like 3 of your friends are running sick house over your monsters, and like maybe you get to kill one of them. Meh. So like 3 people are having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Or 4 people. You could have up to 4 people and then the DM.
So 4 out of 5 people are having a real good time.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of it like, this is the first game that I knew as a kid where you could level up your character. Like, I'd never played a board game like that before as a child, where it was like, oh, you had pretty much a start and an end to the board game. But this was an ongoing thing, which when I was a kid, I didn't really understand that fully, because the idea of what a board game was you pull it off the shelf, you play it with your friends, your family, one session, unless it's Monopoly, which we're not even going to get into in this.
Yeah.
One session, put the game back, go on the shelf, you're done.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, your experience is done. It's completely done in one session, one box. The end. So it's the first game that I didn't fully grasp the idea of leveling up and kind of continuing to play the game and have it be a completely different experience every time, which for that point was very bold.
Yeah, well, this is the point where that changed. So there's 2 kind of strains of tabletop board games. It's the kid games like Candyland, and then you have the wargaming element. And like we've since gotten the European, Carcassonne kind of like thoughtful games.
All the groovy stuff.
Yeah, but that's different. Back in 89, it was like you play crazy, tedious, involved, rule-heavy war games, or you play Candyland, shoots and ladders.
There was no half measures there.
Yeah, until you have HeroQuest. HeroQuest really changed that. It brings a lot of tabletop ideas filtered through role-playing games and puts them on the table with upgradable characters, modular scenarios, and like it changes the way people think about board games. And this inspires so many cool imitators. Oh, there's so many, Hambone. Like even a couple years earlier, 82, 83, D&D puts out like their electronic board game, which is super cool, but it's not really a good representation of Dungeons & Dragons. It's still a very Candyland-like experience.
Oh, it's very rudimentary.
Yeah, I mean, you're just sort of moving through a maze and, you're trying to find the treasure and you're trying to avoid the dragon. And the maze is invisible, which is cool because it's like an electronic gizmo and it's a gimmick, D&D in general spawned a whole bunch of imitation games. And at that point, D&D was already spawning a whole bunch of board games that were imitating it, but it was really just imitating the packaging, the aesthetics. I got that Dragon Master game and like gorgeous cards. Gorgeously illustrated cards. There's like an Elric thing going on, but like the game itself is just a card game. Like there's nothing fantastic about it. There's nothing like role-playing-ish about it. It's just like, hey, that dragon game is big. Let's make a game and put dragon in the title,
I mean, when in Rome.
Yeah, it's great because I love that sort of stuff, but HeroQuest really puts a different sort of game on the table for the first time. And the imitators that come after this also kind of push that. You got Dark World, you got Battle Masters, which is a sequel to HeroQuest. You've got the Dragon Strike board game from TSR with the silly VHS, which is a whole other subject, but it's all along the same lines. And there's other stuff that was sort of in the background too. Like, I don't want to overlook Talisman. Talisman has been around longer than HeroQuest.
Absolutely.
And it's the same kind of thing. Crossbows and Catapults sort of has like a different kind of thing. It's still sort of on the Candyland spectrum, but you can see how it's like trying to push an experience that's different from traditional board games.
Absolutely.
And I just think anything that has miniatures in it just instantly engages people in a way that like a flat board game doesn't,
Well, people love bits and bobs.
Yeah.
Just look at Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, for instance.
That's true.
One of our favorite games to play around the clubhouse. It is made more exciting by seeing more ghosts pop up.
Yep.
And seeing your little miniature guy run through the haunted house. And also by seeing the spawning of the haunts. Like, it really does add a lot of pressure to it, just like playing HeroQuest as a kid. Well, now more and more monsters are coming. What are we going to do? We're outnumbered.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, Battle Masters. As a sequel to HeroQuest, did it improve upon the rules at all, or was it the same rules?
It's a tactical game. You've probably seen them. The miniatures are actually all mounted on these like plastic squares that are about
Right.
3 inches by 3 inches. So like you have a unit. So it'll be like 4 or 5 guys on horseback. And like, it's kind of like in the World War II movies where like the command center is like pushing the things
Gotcha.
across the map with the little, what do you call that? Shuffleboard? The strategic shuffleboard?
Yeah.
It's sort of like that. I've never played it, and you can get it cheap on eBay because there's lots of pieces, and I don't think that most people ever played it.
It sounds like it's a completely different game altogether.
It is a completely different game system, but the miniatures are from that world. It's the same world, the aesthetic. It's like an expanded universe.
So I'd imagine if you look at it like movies, HeroQuest itself was, hey, we're in the dungeon. HeroQuest Battle Masters is now like, okay, now we actually have to fight the armies.
Yeah.
We're out of the castle. Oh, crap. The battle's happening.
Yeah, like there's Chaos Warriors and stuff in the same basic design in Battle Masters. Like I said at the top of the show, it came at a perfect time for that generation of nerds who like monsters and toys of monsters to be a super compelling gateway. And like, it was sort of, I had already been into it for several years at that point. And like, I liked HeroQuest. I thought it was cool. Me and Ed Coleman have like a crazy HeroQuest related story that we should tell someday with this epic made up war game that took over his attic for weeks. So like, it was a part of my game development, right? But like, I had no idea that like this knocked down the door for some people and just like grabbed them by the shoulders and dragged them in. And like, they were sold for life. And I think that's a fantastic thing.
I can absolutely see that. And I also look at boxes like Castle Ravenloft or Wrath of a Chardalon, where you have like these big boxes that are tied into, at the current time, Dungeons and Dragons and the storylines that were happening in or around Dungeons and Dragons at that time, or some classic locations where you have a dungeon delve. Now, granted, you don't have any of the cool furniture. However, you've got a tile-based game where you have to run through with miniatures and fight other miniatures, and the dungeon continues to unfold.
Totally.
Now, do you think that HeroQuest might have stuck around a little longer if you weren't limited to just that one game board? I understand you can display things differently on the board, arrange the board differently. However, there is only so much space on that one board, so many rooms.
Yeah, and there's expansions too. There's 4 or 5. I have 2 of them, Keller's Keep and something about dwarves. And I'm not sure that HeroQuest died like a natural death. I think that like the license kind of just expired and they stopped making it. And I think that it has a huge fan base continuing now that creates new scenarios, that creates new configurations, that has made the rules more balanced. I would say that the rules part is more constrictive to the game's lifespan than the board problem that you mentioned. The fact that you're still limited to that one little board, it's super unbalanced. And I think that eventually it just gets boring.
I can totally see that.
There's definitely a DNA strand that Strahd and Chardalon share with HeroQuest, but I think that you can kind of go too far with it, where I felt like when we played those board games, my main question was like, why aren't we just playing D&D tonight?
Right.
And that's true of the Dragon Strike board game, which came out later in the 90s. Like, it was just too much D&D. It's like, why aren't we just playing D&D? Like, there's a tipping point with bits, right? And I think HeroQuest hits the perfect point where it's like, I can play this, it's manageable, it's a light enough experience where I don't have to like deal with like too much, but like you give me the extra stuff, like, oh, we all have character sheets, we're all different, there's a DM and there's a video, and God, at that point I want to pull it back and just be like, all we need is dice and pencils. Let's get everything else off the table and let's play D&D.
Right. And that said, if you want to play with miniatures, if you bought one of those boxes, you've got like 60 miniatures.
Yeah.
You're good to go. Like, you can start writing your own stories. It's an instant collection of miniatures.
Yeah. I think that those boxes were designed to bring people into D&D proper, but I feel like anytime that D&D has done that, like Dragon Strike was a huge failure. I don't think that the Wrath of a Chardalon did that job. I think that it was sort of like people played it and then they went back to playing D&D. TSR and Wizards, like, I feel like has a problem getting people in through other things. I think that Wizards does a really great job of getting people to play their games, like D&D, but like when they try and like set up that head fake where it's just like, here's a board game that's going to get you into this other game, like I don't think that it ever works.
I think that they never aim it for the right age group and the right market, because looking back at HeroQuest, I think that was the perfect, hey, this is the baby step to get you into Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the way HeroQuest is kind of laid out is similar to keep on the Borderlands,
Yeah.
where you go in, you do a thing, you have to find a door and leave, you go back to your keep, you could level up, now you could get more, whatever it is, and then you go back in.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very great setup as far as these are your training wheels to get into Dungeons & Dragons. Whereas like a box like Wrath of Ashardalon, yes, cool. You go through, the dungeon unfolds, you fight different monsters. There is a level up mechanic. You can actually level up. However, it does hit a certain point where you're like, why aren't we just playing D&D? The rules are a little too heavy for, say, a younger person, which is the ideal candidate to try to indoctrinate them into Dungeons & Dragons and get them to the tabletop RPGs. And then the rules are a little too simple for people who actually play Dungeons & Dragons. And so you're kind of left in the middle, because when I played it with my little cousins, they were like, I don't know what to do. When I played it with you guys, you're like, dude, here's a player's handbook. Just run the game.
And that's the problem. It's like, who is this for? Like, HeroQuest is for kids. And like, those commercials were awesome. Everything about it made you want to play. Like, if you were that specific age, of like 9 to 12, say. And as long as you weren't embarrassed to have like miniatures around your house, this stuff was catnip for you.
Oh, yeah.
But like, you got to keep in mind that TSR did Dungeon! For so many years.
My gosh,
and
right.
Like, that was their board game introduction to D&D. And it's like, not a good game. Like, I like it. It's fine. Like, people have like fond memories of it.
I like the idea of it.
Yeah, it's not a good game. And it's a terrible introduction to D&D because it doesn't share any of the same kind of mechanics, and it's tedious and not fun. I think that Ashardalon, as much as it on the surface looks like a HeroQuest DNA thing, there's also a whole lot of dungeon in it. And there always has been. There's all those basic sets that came out at the end of second edition. They were always trying to like sell you like an entry that was not really a good starter set. They finally figured out the starter set box set thing pretty good.
They've nailed it perfectly at this point.
Yeah. And like, people complain. I was like, well, there's so many starter kits. It's like, yeah, but like, there were always so many starter kits. Like,
My only real complaint with the starter kits now is that they don't make them cool different colors. Like, I feel like the Essentials kit that just recently came out should have been a slightly different color because it would look so much cooler on your shelf next to the starter kit.
Yeah, branding.
That's just an aesthetic problem that I have with
You're
it.
old school.
I like seeing the rainbow of colors.
Yeah, good old Beckme.
Beckme.
But yeah, HeroQuest, man, I think it's something so special and of a specific time. You would never be able to put together a board game like that today and have it like at a reasonable family price. Like, all of those miniatures, there's a ton of miniatures in there.
Oh my gosh, so many miniatures. And also finding a rule set that is comfortable for everyone, because things have changed dramatically since HeroQuest came out. Board gaming, especially family board gaming, has jumped leaps and bounds.
Oh, yeah.
It is so much more than it was when I used to go to Toys R Us and it was like, okay, so here are the board game choices you have. You got Clue, you've got Risk, you've got Life, you've got Candyland, you've got Hungry Hungry Hippos. If you're a sadist, you have Operation. Like, these are your game choices. Now it's like you can go to any store. You can go to Barnes & Nobles. You can go to Target. You can go to your friendly local game store. And there are games for people of every level of gaming, with cool rule sets and things and bits and bobs and things that are going to make you like want to put it on the table and take pictures and post them on Instagram.
Yep.
I don't know that HeroQuest could survive in a market like this because it was a very specific set of rules that kind of transcended little kids kind of getting into the games. And slightly older kids were kind of really psyched to play it, even though maybe they didn't want like their friends to know that they were still playing it when everyone's like playing pencil and papers Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. HeroQuest is very much of its time. And I think that there's just such a rich board game ecosystem right now that we don't need a HeroQuest. HeroQuest did its job. One of the things that happened when I posted it was a lot of people said that they wish that this would get a reissue the way that Talisman did. And Talisman's a different kind of thing. It's a little bit more keyed into like the tabletop role-playing thing and is like, oh, well, everybody couldn't show up tonight to play D&D. Let's play Talisman. Why waste the night? Like, that's a specific thing. I feel like HeroQuest, it's okay to let it go. Like, it was great. It's amazing. And if you still play it, that's cool too. But like, we don't need a new one. And I hate to tell you guys, we're not going to get a new one. They actually let the trademark lapse.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah. So the funny thing here, it always comes back to Chaosium with me, doesn't it?
Gee, you don't say.
So in RuneQuest, there's a thing called HeroQuesting, where you go into the supernatural world of myth. And Greg Stafford always wanted to make a game called HeroQuest. Eventually, Milton Bradley let the thing slip, and he bought it. He had developed the game as Hero Wars, and once the trademark slipped, he grabbed it and turned it into HeroQuest, which is an RPG.
Good for you, Greg Stafford.
Yeah. I like the fact that he was trying for years to get it, and he finally got it.
Like a thief in the night.
Yep. So even if there is a reissue, it's not going to be called HeroQuest. And that's fine, because in like 89 to 91, it was like HeroQuest brought the kids into D&D, and Vampire the Masquerade brought the goth nerds into role-playing games, and it's just like we had this huge new rejuvenation of the pool of people who was playing, and they were people that weren't playing already, and it was awesome.
Huzzah.
Yeah.
Stu, do you have any final thoughts on HeroQuest?
The miniatures are awesome.
Yeah, they are.
The furniture is even awesomer. I never thought, and I kind of had like vague memories of the furniture, but when I got a copy again and I saw that it was just basically folded cardboard with a little plastic top, like, it's so simple and elegant, but perfect. They're so good. They're so cool. There is a lot of people who make custom terrain, and all of it's cool, but there's something about having that and having the inside the box top printing how you fold everything up. Like, there's something about that seems so official.
Oh, yeah.
That it was a moment in time that we'll never get back again, and they were perfect for what they were.
So, Stu, where can people find you?
They can find me every day on Instagram at Vintage RPG.
You could also find me on the Twitter at Handbreaker. I tweet about cute animals. I tweet about Dungeons and Dragons. I tweet about professional wrestling. And you can follow my day-to-day adventures in podcasting and in life over on my Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.